Go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Like I said, it's so wonderful to see familiar faces and names and some new names and faces. Welcome. I am Erin Tannenbaum. I'm the Senior Managing Director of the Southern California Leadership Network. And I'm here with my extraordinary colleagues, Lindsay Johnston, Colleen Menard, and Jessica Coronel. If you want to wave, go ahead, please, by all means. A couple of things before we get started, just some etiquette items. So if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and mute your computer or your phone. And if you don't mind, we'd love to see your face. So turn on your video. You don't have to, of course. And then we are going to take questions during the webinar. So if you would like to ask a question, please go ahead and use the chat function. If you put your cursor at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the toolbar and there's a chat function. And just make sure if you click that and then you look and it says to, just make sure it says everyone. And then Lindsay Johnston and Jessica Coronel will be monitoring the questions for today. So let's go ahead and get started. We're really excited to be doing this webinar with Dr. Jeremy Hunter today. So many of you know Jeremy, have worked with him through Leadership LA, through Leadership Southern California, or on your own. So thank you, Jeremy, for being here today. I'm just going to read your bio and then I will go ahead and turn it over to you. So Dr. Jeremy Hunter is the great-grandson of a sumo wrestler. He serves as the founding director of the Executive Mind Leadership Institute, as well as associate professor of practice at the Peter F. Drucker Graduate School of Management. Jeremy pioneered the teaching of mindfulness-based skills for personal transformation to executives. Since 2003, he has helped leaders transform themselves while retaining their humanity in the face of monumental change and challenge. He has designed and led leadership development programs for a wide variety of organizations, including Fortune 200 Aerospace, Fortune 50 Banking and Finance, Accounting, the Arts, and civic nonprofits. Program impacts have led to both positive professional, personal, and financial outcomes for participants. Jeremy's work is informed by the experience of living day to day for 17 years with a potentially terminal illness. And when faced with the need for life-saving surgery, more than a dozen former students came forward as organ donors. Jeremy has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, The Economist, the Financial Times, the Los Angeles Times, and National Public Radio's Morning Edition. He received his PhD from University of Chicago. He also holds degrees from Harvard University and Wittenberg University. So Jeremy, thank you so much for being here today, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Erin, and thanks to the team for such a smooth setup and teamwork. It's really great. And thank you to everybody. It's very nice to be here, and it's an honor to spend time with you. So thank you for taking time out of what is surely a busy day to attend this webinar. So I'll try to make it worth your while, okay? The title comes from the Storm Makes You Stronger, comes from this Haruki Murakami novel, Kafka on the Shore. But one thing is certain: when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. And that's what this storm is all about. And to me, I think that really set the tone for how I decided I would approach this whole COVID situation. Is how do we come out of the storm better, stronger, more capable, more connected, more loving than we were when we came out of it. Or than when we entered it. And so, I realized in the process of doing this that one of my core beliefs is that no great life was lived without facing a great challenge. And now we have a great challenge. And how do we face a great challenge in a way that is productive and strengthening rather than damaging? And given the fact, we're doing this in a context of leadership, how do you create a platform of strength from which to lead? And given the fact you have so many responsibilities and pressures, and in a situation that is, you know, adverse. So I decided to put together this webinar, which is part of a series of webinars that I'm developing right now. And then, so I thought what we could do is kind of explore the fundamentals for how do you manage what happens inside yourself so that you can more skillfully translate that into wise action outside yourself, okay? So thus this title. So let's just jump into it. What I'd like to do is start first with a poll, and in the chat is a link. Let me see here. I will send it to you. Maybe. My son is about to walk into this webinar right now. Hi, are you gonna join us? Okay, so, you know, Papa's working. There are like 5 million people on the other side of this screen, okay? But this time you put your clothes on, that's great. So take this, in the chat box, there's a link. He's giggling. There's a link. Take that link and put it into a browser, and you will see a window. Hold on, I have to find the browser. You'll see a window that looks like, come on, here we go. Let me find out where it went. Here we go. Okay, good. I'm going to share this screen. So you put that link into a browser and then type in the word that describes how you feel. And we're going to watch this build. Right. Uncertain, anxious, anticipatory, stress, frustrated, jaded, rigid, nervous, pensive, limbo, overwhelmed, hopeful, curious, tired, scared, meh, optimistic, engaged, excited, beat down. It's interesting, as I've done this series over the last 4 weeks with a number of different folks, the words change, right? Because as this situation has been changing. Optimistic, curious. I have to say, I did this with a group in Tokyo now 3 times. Very rarely in the first word cloud do positive words come up in the Japanese context. And that almost always in the American context, curious, optimistic, and hopeful, and usually grateful show up. And so I thought, oh, that's something that's an interesting difference. Okay, that's wonderful, right? So what we can see is the breadth at which we're all kind of experiencing this event, right? And so what we're going to do today, thank you very much. What we're going to, the word cloud is still building. We may revisit it in a moment. What we're going to do today is explore first, how are you? And then I want to talk about 3 principles for managing your inner experience. Then talk about how do you manage fear? What zone are you in, which in about 5 minutes will make more sense than it does now. How do you draw on the resources you have? And then if we have time, we'll do a little Q&A, okay? So we did this. Here is another version of this that I did last week. So you can see it's a similar sort of spread. And it's from, and we saw it here today, right? Thankful, grateful, curious to uncertain and anxious, and what's going to happen. As you know, I teach at the Drucker School of Management, and Peter Drucker is considered to be the founding father of the discipline of management. And he had this kind of very core insight that you can't manage other people unless you manage yourself first. Right? And at the same time, as leaders, leadership is defined by results. And so, those two statements, I think, come together into this kind of expression. Like, first you have to manage two games, right? The inner game of what's going on inside you, right? Which we got a little snapshot of, right? The emotions, the stories in your head, the sensations in your body. And then the outer game, all the stuff that that we've dedicated our lives to do, and the things that we need to take care of and perform and all of that. And we have to do that right now. We have to do it, real time. That's the challenge of leadership. And so we're constantly balancing or moving back and forth, checking in to what's going on inside us and how is that influencing what's going on, how I approach what's going on outside you, right? And you have to do it right now. So let me give you an example. I have a client who was in a pivotal meeting. Somebody in that meeting with a very important client of hers. She's in financial services, and somebody says something inflammatory in the meeting. A wave of anger shoots through the room, and shoots through her as well. She notices this. She was a very good student, by the way, and she immediately grounds herself by holding the tabletop, which gave her a place to put her attention instead of getting caught in this wave of emotion. As the wave inside her subsided, she looked out into the room and acknowledged the emotion that everybody was experiencing, and then very skillfully redirected attention back to the meeting at hand. Her client, who had been shuffling his papers to get ready to leave as a result of this inflammatory comment, put his papers down and sat back in his chair, right? She breathed a sigh of relief, and the meeting was saved, right? But had he walked out, that could have actually been her career. And that is kind of the textbook case of somebody, practicing moving between the inner and outer game and doing it in real time. And that's basically, as if we've worked together, that's basically, what I do. So the key is, like, if you don't know what you're experiencing in any given moment, and I just read a statistic recently that a third of all people basically don't know, only a third of people know what emotion they're experiencing in any given moment, right? So that means 2/3 of us are kind of flying blind, right? Without being able to read the gauges on our dashboard. And given that, the fact we don't really know what we're experiencing inside, we also don't know how that's influencing the choices we perceive, the actions we can take, and then eventually the result we get because of that. And so, right, there's all kinds of talk about mindfulness, but actually it's just as important to talk about mindlessness, and which is the dominant case and the dominant condition of most human beings, right? We're operating on autopilot at least 90% of the time, and we don't really know what's going on inside us. So in these times of challenge, it becomes even more important to understand what emotion are you experiencing, what's the story in your head that you're using to make sense of things, what's going on in your body, your energy level, all of that, right? And so how do we start to fill in the blanks? And so that gets us to principle number 1, right? Which is simply to acknowledge what you are experiencing, which is the point of doing that word cloud, right? Simply to take a moment, check in, and ask yourself, what is going on inside me right now? Right? What is going on inside me right now? And that starts to fill in the blanks for what's happening, right? And I did this with a group at the university. One of my colleagues who'd signed her team on for this, and she said, I did this for my team, but I didn't realize how much I needed something like this for myself as well, right? And so no matter how skillful we think we are in normal circumstances, I think for all of us who are in positions of leadership, we need this even more. And right? So let's just do a quick little check-in again and make it a little bit more refined. Right? Like what's actually happening inside you right now? Right? And just take a moment to sense into that. Like what's happening in your body? What are the emotions you're experiencing? What are the stories that you're entertaining in your head? Right before this, I was working with somebody, and he said, at my firm, I think the adrenaline just ran out. In fact, I know exactly when it ran out. It ran out last Thursday. And because we've been running for 5-6 weeks, and now we're all kind of exhausted. And then what do we do? So part of what we'll do, part of the answer to that is what we're going to do today. So if you could just take a minute and maybe type what you sense into the chat. Like what do you notice happening? You feel good, right? What tells you that? You feel tired, what tells you that? What are the emotions that are going on? Right? What are the stories in your head? When will this end? When will things come back to normal? I was talking to my cousin in Japan, and she said, I can't see the end of this. Right? And because of that, my anxiety is through the roof. Part of this is not to try to anticipate when the end is. Right? And I'm sure right, the research done on prisoners of war, that the prisoners of war who made a deal with themselves that said, we'll be out by Christmas or something like that, they'd set this kind of imaginary deadline that once Christmas came and Christmas went and they were still in captivity, those people didn't fare as well as the people who were just open to the experience, right? And dealing with what they were doing day to day. So let's take a look at the chat, right? Oh, my body aches all over, a feeling of tiredness, a feeling of gratitude, right? Back pain for sure, right? Hi from Melbourne, hi. I feel conflicted, what should I do, right? And my stomach is tight. Feeling so much is out of my control, right? A lack of control, right? Certainly feeling grateful for my life. Told myself to love more. Yeah, isn't that beautiful, right? I think that's one of the opportunities that we have to come out of this. I'm feeling okay and going with it. Great. Grateful for my new office chair. Yeah, right? Note my vulnerabilities. Healing. What is considered normal now? Yeah, these are all beautiful. Right? Exerting control over what I can control too much. I see. That's great. So you get up. You get it, right? You get it. Right? What are you actually experiencing? And be honest with yourself. It's okay. Right? Nobody needs to be superhuman. So that gets us to principle number 2. Principle number 1 is just acknowledging what are you experiencing right now. Principle 2 is accepting the fact that right now this is what you're experiencing. And it's that acceptance that allows that experience to keep flowing. Right? Bruce Lee said, be like water. And when you're like water, you can flow. And this is a skill we have to build, right? And it's not necessarily, for all of us control freaks, it's not necessarily something we like. But how do you accept what you're actually experiencing? Because inevitably, the resistance we give it, the fight we give it, the denial that we try to fool ourselves with creates an internal sense of struggle, right? It increases the amount of friction and energy we waste in terms of what we're experiencing. So let's talk about this from a different way. I have a colleague whose husband is in healthcare, and after this webinar, she went back and talked to him about it, and you can imagine he's on the front lines of things right now. And it was all about helping him manage his anxieties. And he said, when I started to view anxiety and its triggers as part of the process of moving forward, he found that he was able to bounce back quicker, right? The acceptance allows you to bounce back quicker. It's not always the case, and it's not always perfect, but when he actually taps into this process of stopping and identifying the sensations, triggers, and feeling in a weird way, it makes him feel more calm and in control of his emotions while not letting them control him, right? That was like beautiful, a completely unsolicited comment. And I thought, okay, he got it, right? And she got it. So it's, and what I love is this middle line, it's not always perfect. It's not always perfect because we have a certain capacity to deal with this kind of stimulation, and that when what's coming at us exceeds our capacity, it makes it a little more challenging. But part of what we'll talk about today is like, how do you increase your capacity, right? So, I live in a house that's 75 years old, and when we moved in, I think it had 95-year-old wiring that crumbled when you touched it. It was like it didn't burn up in flame, but I had to learn a lot about electric wiring. And so you can think about emotional charges the same way, that if you've got 1 amp wire, but you've got a 2 amp charge, right, then we'll experience that as overwhelming. And so part of what we can do is increase our capacity to deal with a larger kind of charge, which is a muscle, we build over time. And I'll talk about that more. So here's a little science to talk about exactly what I just talked about. That quoted bit, the converging evidence demonstrates that acceptance is a critical emotional regulation mechanism of mindfulness interventions. Translated into English means accepting what you're feeling helps you keep it together, right? And this quality of acceptance is a muscle we can grow. It does not mean that you accept the external circumstance. What it means is that you accept the internal circumstance. That right now you might feel frustrated, right now you might feel tired, right now you might feel hopeless, and that is okay, right? It is accepting what is going on inside. That is something that people often confuse, but what we're talking about is the inner game. So how do we usually deal with reactive emotions? One way we deal with it is to push it away, deny it, distract ourselves from it. Right? It's not there, right? And I'm going to soldier on. There are a lot of people who use this as a mechanism. I have a former student who's head of nursing for a very large hospital, and she wrote me and she goes, I exercise my body, I feed my body, I'm in good physical shape, but I realize I never listen to my body, and I force it to do things that maybe it doesn't want to do. And she realized that she had, even though she's in quite good athletic shape, she has some serious health issues, 3 different kinds of cancers at one point, and she's doing good now. But she realized that she has, for her entire life, has never listened to her body, and that how she's dealt with it is just by powering through. In about 2 minutes, we're going to talk about why that's not necessarily the best strategy to take on. So one way we deal with things is to push things away. The other way we deal with it is that we grasp onto a thought, we amplify the thought, we catastrophize the thought, and then we paralyze ourselves that way. What this acceptance strategy is a third way, which is simply to just let it be there, right? Just to let it be there and allow it to come and go, right? Allowing it to come and go is what makes the whole mindfulness process work. So we'll talk about that more in a minute, right? Principle number 3 is that attention needs somewhere good to go, right? That your survival system will automatically prioritize looking for threat, danger, and what's not working. It will automatically do that. And we have to be conscious of how we're using our attention and conscious of investing it in places of strength and nourishment and possibility. It doesn't mean ignoring the problems outside, but it also means paying attention to what is working, right? What is working. In fact, there's a scene out of Apollo 13, the movie, where the Apollo moon capsule had an accident, and these 3 men were, basically trapped in space. And somebody had the wherewithal to say, okay, well, what is working? What is working, right? Rather than focusing on the fact that these guys could potentially be dead, right? And it was that question that turned everything around, because then they could put their attention on the things they could actually do. And as you know, right, like every good American movie, it ends with a happy ending, right? So one of my students said, oh, I felt like I pulled myself out of the cul-de-sac I had driven myself into, and I became more hopeful and my energy came back. Right? That's why it's important to put your attention in somewhere that's also good. Right? So one question I have for you is like, what are you giving your attention to? Right? What are you giving your attention to? And now with this work at home situation, you know, what is your entire family giving its attention to? You know, we have our little son, and you know, learning how we're not managing his time, right? We're managing his attention. And what are the things that we can give him that he can put his attention on that are going to be helpful and growth oriented for him? And then, whereas a family, how are we doing that? And then with your work group, how are you doing that? Right? And your organization, how are you doing that? So the best leaders I've seen in this crisis have a weekly all hands meeting, and the best ones I have seen consistently frame the value of the work people are doing in the organization to the challenges they're facing with this COVID-19 situation, right? So that people understand, like, and contextualize the value of their work given this crisis. And in those organizations, they are thriving, right? We're not dealing with a situation of coping. They're thriving. So next topic, how do you manage fear, right? So I like to ask people, you know, are you managing fear or is fear managing you? Right? And as I mentioned, right, fear is something that will just happen automatically. It's part of your built-in survival system, right? And what fear reactions do are create energy to help you survive, right? They help you fight off an attacker, they help you escape an attacker, or they freeze you and let the attacker walk by so that you can live another day. And so I don't think of emotions as good emotions and bad emotions, right? There aren't the emotions I want and then the emotions I don't want. It doesn't work that way, right? They're the emotions of growth and connection, like the gratitude and appreciation that we saw earlier in the word cloud, right? Those are the emotions of growth and connection. And on the other side, you have the emotions of protection and survival, right? And that the emotions of protection and survival are just as important. You don't want to get rid of anger or fear or disgust, right? They have an important role to play in human affairs. But understand that, you know, the sources of threat are very different than tigers, you know, chasing us down Grand Avenue, right? In fact, I should put, if I had the wherewithal, I should put a little COVID-19 right in the middle of this image, right? Because your anxiety or, you know, your flight mechanism doesn't necessarily help you in dealing with this kind of threat, right? We have to be far more intelligent. In fact, I think of, you know, what we're being asked to do is kind of like the world's greatest mindfulness lesson, right? You have to stop mindlessly touching your face. You have to remember to go wash your hands, right? You have to withstand the frustration of being trapped in your house and forego the temptation of wanting to go to the beach and hang out with everybody, right? It's the greatest self-management lesson, you know, that I think we've found or faced in recent times. So, you know, how do we start to manage the nervous system? He says, touching his face, right? Right? Managing yourself first means learning how to manage your nervous system. So what does that mean? You know, and if we've worked together before, you kind of know this slide, that on one side you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like the brake. It's like it slows things down, your heart rate goes down, your muscles relax, your digestion is online. That's nice, right? And then the sympathetic nervous system is on the other side. It's like the gas pedal. Your heart rate goes up, your muscles brace for action. All the adrenaline that we've been running off of for the last 5 or 6 weeks is all part of the sympathetic nervous system. Conversion of glycogen to glucose, right? I don't know about you, but in our house, we have what we call the phenomena of the corona carbs, which is all the junk food we've been eating for the last 6 weeks, right? And I have found myself buying things that under normal circumstance, I never, ever buy, but somehow they have found their way in our house and maybe in your house too, right? So right? The conversion of glycogen to glucose is all like the cheap, easy energy you want to make yourself feel good. And so like, that's also part of it. Another way to think about this, and I think this is key to this whole story, is, you know, ideally, like, how do we face challenge is in the green zone, which is where we're most, which is where our nervous system is in its most adaptive and dynamic place. I call it, in this case, I call it the zone of coherence. And the image that I have in mind for us is like, how do we become islands of coherence in what is otherwise a sea of chaos, right? How do you be the calm, collected one and help the people around you be calm and collected so that they can meet the challenges facing us all in a calm and collected way and increase that capacity of calm and collectedness, right? How do you become an island of coherence in a sea of chaos? And that means acknowledging that every once in a while, you know, and maybe more than that, you know, we move into the red zone, right? Which is this gas pedal, which is a state of internal chaos, right? It's like the pot boiling over, right? And that's characterized by, and it's like hard to sleep. You have tension in the muscles, which we heard a little bit about earlier, right? We get tunnel vision. We start to get irritable. You know, FDS is frivolity deficiency syndrome, right? You get too serious about things, right? And you can't see what's good in front of you, right? So I think collectively, planet Earth has been in the red zone probably for the last 6 to 8 weeks, you know? And for other places, maybe even more than that. So the cheeseburger chocolate axis is the, you know, the carbohydrate and sugar and all of that we've been eating nonstop. And then, so the thing is that if you are in the red zone for an extended period of time, your body's capacity to make adrenaline will dry up, right? It will stop. And then that's when you start kind of moving into the black zone, which is a sense of no energy, right? If the previous slide described like too much energy and I can't control it, this is no energy and I can't move. Right? So we give up, we feel disconnected, depressed, exhausted, low energy. You get into, if you extend this over years, then you get into things like immune system dysfunction, a sense of why bother. And it's important to acknowledge that you might go through this whole cycle in a day, right? You know, I noticed even in myself, there are these moments, there are these punctuated moments in my day where I feel this intense appreciation of being alive. And then maybe 3 hours later, I feel kind of tired and I want to go take a nap, right? And that you might kind of move up and down in one day, right? Let alone as this situation unfolds, decisions are made, like laws are passed, like how do those play out, right? That might influence your movement through these zones, you know, and you know, ideally where we'd like to be is in this green zone. Like, how do you be here? This is where we learn. This is where we adapt. You know, I think that for me, the best leaders don't see this as a situation to cope through. They see this as an opportunity for their own transformation. Like, how do we use this process of this COVID situation as an opportunity to transform, to become better than we are, right? To find the strength that we don't have or that we didn't know we had, right? Or this capacity to learn, or this capacity to love one another that under normal circumstances, we aren't pushed to look for. And so what I've witnessed is that the best leaders go here. They figure out a way to go here and to stay here, as best they can, to return here when they leave. And then what we'll talk about in a minute is like, how do you increase your capacity to stay here over time, right? So, okay. So now think about this. So this is not, the purpose of this conversation is not simply to say, hey, feel good, right? It's to say, how do you stay in your green zone so that your capacity to make good choices, or your capacity to even see or create a broader range of choices, becomes enhanced. That to me is the purpose of this work, right? So think about in your own case, right? If you're experiencing frustration, anger, impatience, or whatever, right? How does that influence your capacity to see choices, right? And how does that influence the action you take and the result you get? Versus if you're in a place of appreciation, calm, or joyfulness, right? How does that influence your choice? Right? How does that influence your action? And how does that influence the result you get? The fellow I was talking to right before we started is head of a construction for a large real estate company, and he, in order to meet several deadlines, he pulled an all-nighter one night and was up till 3 o'clock finishing up documents and got them done, and realized that he had really neglected his family for the past week, and he woke up at about 10 o'clock, realizing he had so many things to do for his family. Went outside and saw that his family had, his wife and children were finishing up washing Dad's truck, right? And which was on his to-do list for that day. And he kind of sat down. He said, I had my coffee cup in my hand. I sat down, and at that moment, I feel how much my family really loves me, and that no matter what happens, somebody's got my back. And here's this kind of burly guy with tears coming down his face, realizing that, I'm in this situation that I cannot take for granted, right? So what is that like for you? So what I'd like you to do is to think about, like right now, if you thought about the red zone, green zone, black zone, like what are your tells, right? Given the fact that we're mostly mindless most of the time, right? Let's be conscious of what are your tells. Like what does each zone look like, sound like, and feel like for you? Right? How do you know? And if you don't know, the people that live with you or work with you will know. So if you don't know, just ask them and they will gladly tell you. And then on the flip side, is do you have a map for what the tells are of the people around you, the people you live with or work with? How do you know what zone they're in? And how do you start to, which I'm sure you're probably already doing, right? How do you have a regular check-in with one another? How do you have a regular check-in with one another? Maybe, with the people you live with, maybe multiple times a day. Just how are things going, right? As this situation evolves, our response to it evolves, right? You might be feeling good in the morning, but you might feel really anxious at lunch, right? And it's important to simply just put that on the table. The teams that I've found that aren't cohesive, that feel like that things are kind of chaotic, don't have regular check-ins. Right? And so, what does that sound like? It might sound like, how are you doing? What's on your mind? What concerns do you have, right? You have your own words. These are just suggestions for you. But if you had to take a minute to think about who are the most important people around you and what are the signs they give off that tell you, oh, she's in the red zone right now, or he's in the black zone right now, or we're all green. And then just as important is like, what are those tells for you? So, right, managing ourselves starts with managing our nervous system. And so we have to have a kind of robust awareness of what is that nervous system doing, especially now in situations like this one. So here's the question I think that's on all our minds. Like, okay, I know I've been in the red zone. Like, how do I get out of here? Like, how do I go back? How do I go back into a place of coherence? And so that's what I'd like to do right now. This is, I will send this along. So I'll send this to the team and they can send it to you. This is something that I work with all the time, but it's an exercise called resourcing. And resources are anything that helps you feel good, strong, loved, or safe. Right? Everybody has a resource. And I'm going to mute us for a minute. There we go. Resources could be outside of you. Resources could be inside you, right? Resources outside you could be experiences you've had that have been powerful or reassuring or reinforcing, strengthening. places you like to go to. Yosemite for many people, or a national park is a frequent place that comes up. People who are important to you in your life, pets, right? Dog or a cat. Dog or a cat often shows up more than spouses in this conversation for some reason. Music you find soothing. Resources inside you might be spiritual imagery, right? Your relationship with a higher power. Personal qualities you like about yourself, values that are important to you that animate your life. So let's take a minute just to think about, what are some resources you have? What are some resources you have? Okay, and if you want, you can type them into the chat. Okay, thank you, Sheila. Home, family, friends, food. Right? Any Monty Python show? Yeah, fantastic. Internet, yes. Exercise early in the morning, feeling the gift of time, beautiful. Walk the dog, nature, prayer, fasting, reflection, running, family. Hopefully not running from the family. Gardening, playlist, parents, spouse, cooking, family and dog, guide dog, gardening, exercise, meditation, music, singing, music. Warm car for a little escape. Yes, it's Los Angeles after all. Just as long as you don't touch anybody when you go out, there's no reason to stop you from going out, right? People connection. Hi, Joe. Exercise, reading. Parody songs about COVID. Yeah, that's great. Please share. Making art, or art, maybe the presence of art. Walking in the market, right? No driving, just sitting in the car. Yeah, great. Healthy hiding. Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Learning music, yoga. Beautiful. Okay. So now let's do a little exercise. Exercise sounds like work. Let's do something enjoyable, which is pick one of the resources. Pick one of your resources. Right? And probably, you can do this. My suggestion is to do this with eyes closed. It's probably easier. Be comfortable wherever you're sitting. Right? Notice how your body is feeling. Notice how your body's feeling, and then bring to mind one of the resources. Right? For my guy this morning, it was his resource, which was really fresh, which was the moment he felt so loved by his family. Right? So like bring to mind your resource. And as you bring it to mind, notice like what would you be seeing, hearing, and feeling? What would you be seeing, hearing, and feeling? If it's a person, can you see their smiling face? If it's a place, like what are you seeing around you? If it's music, like are you in a concert hall listening to that? Or maybe your car? Maybe it's your relationship with a higher power. Just bring that to mind. And then as you bring it to mind, notice what happens in the body. Notice what's happening inside. You might notice a pleasant, and if not pleasant, a neutral sensation. But if you notice there's a pleasant sensation or neutral place, then put your attention there. You don't have to make anything happen. Just put your attention there and then see what happens next. All right, see what happens next. Sometimes resources come along with multiple aspects, and if, for example, it's a person, but that person may no longer be alive, sadness comes along with that. And if that happens, that's absolutely normal and understandable. But just say hello to that difficult aspect or less pleasant aspect, and then shift your attention back to the pleasant aspect. You might notice shifts happening inside, or tingly sensations, or involuntary muscle movements, or just a sense of something opening up, or maybe wanting to stretch. And if you want to refresh the resource or shift the resource, change the resource, that's okay too. But what happens when you put your attention on sensations that are pleasant? More space in my belly, more ease. Beautiful. So you can go back if you want. You can hang out there for a little while if you want, but you can go back to the link and there's a new question. Like, what are you experiencing now? Less stiffening. Peace, calm, smiling. Opening in the chest. Emotional release. Breathing slows. Smiling. Sleepy. Kinder. Centered. Right. More in control. Tears, and if tears want to come out, let them come out. That's part of shifting back from red to green. Don't push that away. Right? Isn't this beautiful? Grounded, present. Gratefulness. Notice it keeps building warmth, joy. Isn't that great? So let's see, can I find it? Oh, it's still building, interesting. Look at the first, here's the first word cloud we did, right? Anxious, uncertain. Now here's what we just did. So this will keep building for some time. I'm going to go back here. I'll go back to the PowerPoint, but thank you, everybody. Here's one I did the other day. You know, what changed? Here we go. This is another one. So, right, these resources are not far from you, right? That's what I love about this process. And you probably have more than you realize. And in fact, one exercise you might want to do is simply start to make a list of what are all your resources. And then have that conversation with the people in your life. What are their resources? And how do you start to talk about that? We did this for a little longer than I would in a webinar, but if we were doing this like in a classroom setting, we might do this, just hang out into this space for like 20 minutes, right? And then it just grows and it grows and it grows. You don't need to go far, right? You don't need to go far. It's right here. It's right here. So try it, right? Maybe just a few minutes a day. And of course, it's not like eating spinach. It's actually quite pleasant, as you saw. So curious to know if you have any insights from this process. Please put them in the chat. And then, while you're doing that, I have questions for you to consider. Let's pull the camera. Okay. Just like, what is COVID-19 teaching you about you and your relationship to challenge? And who has it made visible to you that you didn't see before? Right? I think that's one of the most fascinating things about this experience is that crisis is clarifying, and that we can see things that under normal circumstances we might not be able to see. And who is that? And what is that? And how might that shift your relationship? What interconnections do you see now that you didn't see before? Right? Isn't it amazing? That all around the world simultaneously. I don't know if this is probably higher now, but at some point, 1/5 of all humanity was under some kind of quarantine situation. It's 1.4 billion people experiencing simultaneously the same experience around the globe. Right? We can see the interconnectedness of so many things. Who knew, right? What econ class would have ever said, oh, the foundation of the global economy is actually good human health? No econ class I ever took said that. And yet that's so fundamental, right? And you can see that, what happens in China will eventually happen to us at some place, which will eventually happen to Italy, which will eventually happen to Norway, which will eventually happen, to India, to Africa. Right? You start to see the reality, the visceral reality of interconnectedness on this planet. Right? Right? What has this shown you about your relationship to nature? Right? I mean, look at our clean air. Right? Humanity takes the bench for a month, and look at what nature does. And then what has it clarified for you about what is important to you? Right? Which I think is one of the most important questions of all, right? The crisis is clarifying. And it helps us to see, what normally we don't see. I am not my 401k, Joe says, right? Life can be simpler and joyful. And I think that for many of us, right, especially for folks who haven't ever had to live with constraint, to be able to, this situation is highly constraining in any number of ways. Like, what does constraint create for you? We tend to think of constraint as something that limits. But I know that many people have said, oh, I found that constraint for me creates possibilities. And I'd be curious to know what that is for you. So minimalism, my good friend Usman says, yeah, absolutely. What do you actually need? Right? What do you actually need? And what do your people need around you? So that's all I have for now. If you're a glutton for punishment and you want more, this is my TED Talk, How to Change Your Future. If you just Google that, it'll come up at some point. But in any case, thank you. I'm very happy to be with you today. And if you have some questions, happy to entertain them. I never knew work outside of an hour commute each way and discovering life without a commute. Yeah, absolutely. Right? It's interesting, right? How will this change how we work together? I'm never leaving my house. So in any case, thank you very much. You guys are wonderful. Are there any common resources that you've seen? Josh, say a little bit more about what you'd like. Thank you, and SCL team. Yeah, thank you guys. So let's see, leave that up.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Jeremy?
Oh, resources that I've seen the most. Yeah, good question. Other humans and their feline and their furry friends are the most common ones I've seen. Living creatures like other living creatures. Thoughts on mindfulness app? Yes. Several. Bright Mind is one I like. Insight Timer is another. You might see my things on Insight Timer maybe in the next week, actually. And then, of course, everyone knows Calm and Headspace. But I like Bright Mind and Insight Timer the best. Let's see. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Recording, yes, will be available. And I will send you handouts. And the other thing, which I think is just a natural for this community, is, how is this an opportunity to serve? And, oh, yes, wait, my wife just passed me a note. I do, in fact, which I discovered the other day, have a SoundCloud page, which I totally forgot about, which turns out to have 17,500 listens on it, which kind of blew me away. But yeah, Jeremy Hunter 123 on SoundCloud. If you want more. And let's see, what else? The resources, that was one. Yes. So the other thing, which was how is this for you a call to service, right? And that's where I think, moving the conversation beyond coping, like, okay, how do we step up and help the people who are in need? At the very least, the LA County Food Bank is one place to put your energy, because for a very low price, they can feed a lot of folks, who need that. Thank you, Lindsay. But so, in any case, thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Jeremy, so much. And just a couple of things. So first of all, once again, Jeremy, thank you for taking the time. I know how sought after you are, but we are all so appreciative of you giving us your time today. I just wanted to say that this was recorded, and SCLN has a COVID-19 resource page on its website. And there are resources there of how to get engaged in the community, to Jeremy's point about the food bank. We also have 2 other webinars that we have done. So this is a series that the recordings are on there as well. And then I just want to say that SCLN has pivoted, and we are still delivering our programming. So we're in Leadership LA right now. We will launch Leadership Southern California in June, and the deadline to apply, we're still taking applications, is April 30th. And then we will launch the Reardon Leadership Institute in September. The deadline for that is May 1st. We are combining virtual and in-person programming, and I want to thank the SCLN team for making this transition and for still implementing our valuable programming. If you have any questions, please go to our website, leadershipnetwork.org. And if you have questions about recruitment, you can email Jessica at jcoronel@lachamber.com, and she just added that to the chat. So thank you, everyone, for your participation and engagement today. It is always so much more valuable when everyone engages. So, and thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you, guys. It was a real pleasure. So.
All right, take care.
Take care.